Hi, I'm Kath from Catfish Creative. I've been running my own design business now for 10 years in this lovely studio, and I'm here to share with you some top tips for your design journey. So in my graphic design work, I've worked with lots of social impact, social change, conservation agencies, and people just like you doing really good work. So it's very important that we get our messages out there in the best possible way. And so that's why I'm here. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about design for the social sector, why that's a little bit different than designing for the corporate world or fast-moving consumer goods. I'm going to give you some design principles and tips. I've learned a lot on my journey, and I'm going to condense that down and give you just a few little snippets that may be helpful. And then I'm going to move on to the 7-step catfish method, which will just take you through a process that might really help you with the briefing, working with the designer, and finalising of a project. So design for the social sector, why is it different? Well, the main thing that I've found with working with my lovely clients is you guys are doing more with less. You've got time constraints, there's an ever-changing landscape, you're working usually with a smaller team and less resources, you've got way less budget to work with, and generally speaking, you've got a few stakeholders to be thinking about, so your demographic is quite big. And also, I find that there's a lot of people on the project. Even if you've got a small team, you've got other stakeholders who will have a say in what happens. So it can be a little bit more complex, but I think the main thing is your time and your budget constraints, which is why it's so important to get it right from the off. And these steps that I'll take you through will hopefully help you to streamline that process and save money and time. So what makes good design? So there's a lot of magic in design, but there's also method that underlies that. And as I've mentioned before, the design principles that underpin and are the blueprint for good design, I won't go into those in detail, but I'll probably give you the top 3 and then move on to a few tips that will help you before I take you through the main steps. So alignment is one of the most important of the design principles. It's essential to creating designs that are easier to read and navigate. It basically means be nice to your viewer by lining things up in margins and columns. Our brains just love it when things line up or a given space, and it makes information easier to read and retain. So my tip here is stick to a grid. Consistency. You don't need a 40-page style guide to maintain consistency through your work and a recognisable style. By repeating elements of your designs, this could be spacing, colour or image style, through your collateral, you can create a rhythm or familiarity or identity through your work. So the tip here is have a few rules that are easy to remember and flow these through your work in a nice and simple way. The next design principle is hierarchy, and this really refers to the visual clarity of information in a space. Is the design broken up appropriately in line with its importance? So when looking at a design, where does your eye go first? And is this what you want your end user to be focusing on? As a designer, I often get asked by my clients to increase the size of lots of different elements of things on the page. And what happens then is you lose that hierarchy, you lose the power of the intent of the message. So what is it you want the eye drawn to? Is it a title, a web address, a call to action? Make sure then that stands out the most and let everything else fall back. So my tip here is test your design with others. Ask where their eye is drawn when they look at your page, web page or report. So I'll now move on for the principles to a few little practical tips and things that you can do to make sure your designs are really good. So first of all, look after your image library. So you may have seen some stuff about photography and getting good photographs. Your image library is super important to your brand and to your message and to your story. So we really need high quality and relevant images. Some of the most poignant designs that I've ever seen and some of the most memorable ones are often just made up of a strong image, a logo and a really well tied in piece of copy. Designs can be very, very simple and very image-based. Do make sure your imagery is a minimum of 300 dots per inch, DPI, where possible. And if you don't have a bank of great images, scour stock libraries for what you need, or preferably get a good photographer on site to do a shoot for your project. Good high-quality photos are worth their weight in gold. So here's a tip. If you already have a logo, always keep a high-resolution, transparent version of your logo on file for your graphic designer. You'd be surprised how many organizations haven't got this ready for their designer and they have to scour through their archives to find it. So we're here talking about a vector, which is either an EPS or an AI file. Your designer will know what those are, and you should just keep those on hand at all times. So just your type. My other little tip for you, you might be tempted to use a whole suite of different fonts for your design. This is a huge no-no in the design world. As tempting as it is to get all funky and use all these lovely, florally expressive typefaces, we really need to limit that. And the ruling really is 2 fonts maximum. Ideally, you'd be using 1 font family, and within that you can have a bold, a semi-bold, a light. I'm sure you're probably familiar with a few font faces, having used Word or even just editing things in an email. Try and keep that as minimal as possible with a font that you love that you can be using ongoing through your campaign. So my final little tip is really aim for the feels. You want to invoke emotions and make people feel something when they're looking at your design. So it could be really a simple juxtaposition of a profound image that evokes some sort of emotion. It could be the copy that you use. Ultimately, the design brings these elements together, but you want to invoke some sort of emotion. So whether it be laughter or tugging at the vagus nerve or jerking a tear, whatever it might be, think about that through your content and your design. I think especially in the social space, you really want to get people on board and you want them to feel something. So bear that in mind too. So now I'm going to move on to the catfish design method, which is 7 steps. CATFISH, which I have put together for you to go through the whole process from coming up with the idea to reviewing everything that's been done. So no matter how big or small your project is, we're going to go through these steps. So we've got capture your idea to start with. We've got assemble your A team, get your people together, tighten your briefs, which does exactly what it says on the tin. Really get that watertight brief ready. Free your mind, and you can bring your own visualizations and creativity to the table. Iterate, simplify, and then at the end there, how did it go? So for the first step, capture your idea. This is a really simple top line step that I think can be overlooked if you go straight into the briefing process. So I've set up a little tool that you can use. It's really simple. So first of all, let's just start with your why. As an organization working in the social impact space, your why is huge. It's why you do what you do. It's your sense of purpose. So this needs to come across not only for your organization, but for the piece that you're developing, whether it be a brand piece or something to engage stakeholders perhaps. So your big why is really important to the designer. So I'd say firstly your why, and secondly, what are the most desirable outcomes that could benefit you from doing this graphic design project? You know, what is the kind of the call to action? Do you want people to sign up for something, or do you want them to change the world? So put your big dreams in there too. So the next step is assemble your team. The person watching this is probably going to be the go-to guy or gal in your organization who's going to be liaising with the designer. If not, select one person as the communicator. This is really important. If you're doing a project with a designer, they really just want to gather all of the information and content from one person, all of the changes from one person, and hand that all back to one person. It makes everything so much cleaner and easier and time-saving. So then also selecting your designer. You may not have someone ready to go yet, and there's a few tips for that too. Really look into this sort of social impact space, who's designing in this space already. It's good to get someone who's on side, who's passionate about the same kind of things as you are, and is going to really drive your purpose through their work. They'll give it their heart and soul. So I think that's a really important thing. And you're going to be having a relationship with this person for a short period of time. So you want to have fun. So really source your designer well, and you should get much better results. Now, if you can, as part of this, set up a sort of testing team. So you'll obviously be giving and getting the feedback from the designer, but you may want an end user, someone from the demographic that you are pitching to with your design, to be there to give some feedback. And you're going to have stakeholders or people within your organization who are going to want to have a say. So maybe just set up a small group of those people, keep it small, because I find one of the biggest time delays in graphic design projects is really just having too many cooks, too many people wanting to make changes. So keep your team really agile and have one spokesperson. So the next one, the T, is tighten your briefs. So This is where you've really got to pull your pants up and get all your information together for the designer. So they'll already have your creative canvas from the capturing your idea phase. So they'll have an idea of why you're doing what you're doing and what you want to achieve. But you really need to get these kind of fundamentals in place. You've probably seen or done design briefs before, and it's a pretty standard template. There's just a few things that you really need to have in there for a designer to be able to come back, say, with a quote for the piece. They may have more questions after that. So I could speak all day on this topic, and I'm currently writing a book on it, which I will make available to you. I'm just going to give you a few pointers of the things that absolutely need to be in this brief. So you need a bit about you and your organisation. If you're starting out, we may need to get a few paragraphs from you on your why, what and how, mostly your why. You can use that creative canvas again as a method for sharing this if you want to. But if you've already got a website and you're already established, we don't need much here. We don't need pages and pages about who you are, your vision, your values, just the basics. Why are you here? What do you do and how do you do it? What makes you different? We need provisions. So what have you got for us, the designers, to get started? What will you provide for the job? Do you have a brand already, a style guide, the photographs you need, data, copy? Is your copy final, edited and spell checked? Now this is a massive one. Really try and get all of your copy and ideas ready to go, because that's going to save you a lot of time in the iteration phase, which comes later. Also, as I mentioned earlier, are your images of a high resolution? Keep those things. Don't just pull things off the internet at low resolution and try and fit them into a brochure. We really need those 300 dpi well thought out images to be placed. So scope is really important. Everything you'll need for this project, everything you expect to be delivered. So just put those as bullet points. It could be you're looking at getting some DL flyers and an A4 page ad. So just list those and then give the specifications and format for those. So for each of those things, it could be there might be dimensions, there might be the kind of paper that you're using, if you know what that is. It might be where it sits in a magazine. Those kind of specs are really, really good for us to know how and why and where the piece of work is going to be placed. So this is a really important one, is your target market, your demographic, the people who are at the end user part of your design, the people who are going to be taking it on and hopefully acting and creating some positive change in the world as a result of being aligned with you guys. So why not create personas for your end user? This is a very well used skill. So you need just to set it up. So maybe it's David, he's 39, he uses an iPad, he's an actuary, he watches these kind of shows. Try and set things up so they're actually people and send those people through to your design. That's really going to help them get an idea of who your audience actually is. Your key objectives and goals, hopefully you've covered a couple of those in your original capture your idea creative canvas, but add to that, what are the long-term high-level changes you want to see happen? Are you looking to raise awareness, change behaviour, educate, or do you want your design piece to go viral? Is it shareable online? So yeah, really think about that stuff and let the designer know what those end goals are. Now, things like due date and budget, they're pretty standard things too, but you can extend on that with time and the due date. Don't just give, right, we need it done by this date. You probably thought that out already. Don't wing it with time. Just really set things up so that you've got phases. So you might want design one to come back, the draft design to come back by a certain date. Give your team that you've assembled, your little Avenger team, to time to actually look back at the design and feedback. Get back to the designer, then allow for another phase and maybe a third phase if that's needed. And just give yourself plenty of time. And if you're printing, you'll need to take into account the print deadline and the time it will take for them to create your work too. So really think about that timeline if you can, rather than just saying we need it done by 20th of October. So next, F, free your mind and share your vision. So this is a step that I've added in that I think is missing from a lot of the briefing processes with design relationships. And it's based around the fact that you will actually have a vision about what you like and what you don't like, how you eventually want something to look. And I think a big mistake that's made on the client side is you're the designer, you wow me with your prowess. And it doesn't always work like that, as you probably experienced before. We really need to know your likes and dislikes. So I think once you've got that, capture your idea, You've sent the brief with all the specifications and details. The designer's then gone off and used their magic powers to come up with some ideas, free from the constraints of your design ideas perhaps. So there's a lovely sweet spot between what the designer's come up with and what you are really looking for. So this is the opportunity to create some mood boards, share some URLs of websites that you really like, basically the do's and the do nots of what you like about design or you like about certain projects. So then we as the designers have a real idea of what it is that you're eventually looking for in a much more visual sense. So we're right brain people. We love visuals. You give us a brief of 40 pages full of text, we do kind of switch off. So I think it's good to have these phases where you have a really simple first phase, really detailed but succinct briefing phase, and then this lovely your turn to shine and show your visual diary of the ideas that you like. So now we're on to I, which is iterate. So the designer's gone away with your ideas, the brief, their ideas, and they've come back to you with draft one. And it's time now to review that and get back to the designer with changes. So the most important thing here, I think, is really to get out of your own head space for a little while and move into that of your demographic, of those personas we talked about earlier. Who's going to be looking at this design and what do you want from them? So really get into their headspace. Obviously you're going to be looking for typos. You're going to be looking for those alignment issues, anything to do with consistency, some of those things I mentioned earlier. Okay, so now we've done our changes and we're getting another draft back from the designer. Maybe it's the final draft, but I think it's really important at this point to look at it and to really try and take away anything more that you can. It's a well-known quote in the world of design. A designer knows he or she has achieved perfection, not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So use this next round in the design process to take away whatever you can rather than add. It's really important now that you can just simplify. So this is the final stage. We've signed off on our stunning, simple and attention-grabbing piece, and it's gone out into the world. And hopefully it's creating a stir, it's evoking some emotion, and it's getting people to get in contact with you. So at some stage, rather than just running to the next job, we're on to the H. How did it go? Really it won't take long. It's kind of like the capture idea phase. You only need to take 5 minutes. Just review and reflect on how the design project has gone. What went well, what didn't go well, what would you change? It's really important to do these little things because it really helps you for the next design project that you work on. So let's recap. Design is a two-way street. So for me, it's always been based on relationships and the to and fro, being a fun process, being a clear process, being a succinct process. So if you can really nail that and get that down with your designer, you're going to have a great relationship, gratitude, and probably a smaller invoice, and you're probably going to get things done on time. So yeah, please use this simple methodology. Use those little tips I mentioned of what to look for in a great design, in your great designs. Follow those 7 steps that I talked you through, the catfish method. So that's capture your idea, assemble your A-team, tighten your briefs, free your mind and share your vision, iterate, simplify, and how did it go? And finally, another H, just have fun, enjoy it, and I hope this has been really helpful for you.